Trish faced a brain tumor with humor. She is a story of resilience, charity, and love, and an honor from the British Empire.
Yeah, but in 2017, January 2017, I took a grand mal seizure in my sleep and was subsequently diagnosed with a grade 3. I'm going to be technical, but it's grade 3 brain tumour, but it's called an anaplastic astrocytoma brain tumour, which was then classified as terminal and incurable. But, I was nearly 10 years ago. It was completely unexpected and just, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I could date symptoms back probably for nearly a decade before that. Headaches and just feeling a bit kind of woolly, I didn't really know what was going on, a bit surreal. I didn't really know what was going on around me sometimes. Partial seizures, but I remember saying to my doctor after I was diagnosed, saying, you don't get headaches, and immediately think, oh, I must have a brain tumour. And his response was, you'd be surprised. So I suppose Dr. Google tells a lot of people they have brain tumours and all sorts of things that they don't have. A very scary time, and there was a lot of guilt with it as well. My son was about to do what we call his A-levels, which were very important exams. It's the exams you do here before you go to university or not. My husband had just recently been told that the factory that he worked in was closing down, so he was going to be made redundant. He had immediately started to look for another job. He was in his new job 3 weeks whenever I had that seizure. Had he still been in the factory, he would have been on night shift that night, so I wouldn't have survived the first night. So I do think everything works out I'm not religious, but I think there's everything for a reason, So I've been very, very fortunate. And how have I coped with it? By leaning on other people, I think, is the best way. Well, humour and just, my husband Finlay is fabulous. He's amazing. Our son is great in his own way. We worried that he wasn't really taking it seriously because there was a time, it's classed as terminal and incurable. They never had a time limit, but I know that we look at averages. And never look at averages. Averages of what? As an analyst, people find that funny that I'm going, well, average, that's just damn lies and statistics. So I'm going, no, unless you can give me an average of every woman the same age as me, same environmental factors, everything the same, then it's not an average. Yeah. It's an average of women roughly my age, which we're all different, so I don't see it as, or I don't listen to the averages. So that, yes, that has been a challenge, there's no doubt, but I think we're and I say we because it is we, my husband and I, and our son to an extent, his response was, well, I was never worried about you because I knew you'd be okay, which is the most wonderful thing to hear from your son, and it's very motivating. He thinks I'm going to be here, so I have to stay. And but I continue to work and things because that helps me. I've got a routine. I get up in the morning, I've got something to do, and I go and I do it. And my husband is just wonderful. Sometimes it's not funny. Sometimes it just feels all a bit rotten, and I get what I would call a bit glum, where I'm quivery bottom lip. When you're, it's not fair. Life's not fair.
Yeah.
But when I get like that, I know that Finlay's there, and I'll say to him, feeling a bit sad. And he'll go, why are you sad, darling? Because it's not fair. And he's like, no, it's not fair. And then we just, do you want to go for a walk, or will we go to the sea, or do you want to watch something on TV, or do you want to go and play piano, or read a book, and there's always a way around it, or sometimes just a hug. And it's an ongoing challenge, always will be, for us in life, which will be, I think I'll be old and decrepit. I'm going to make it to 90 at least. I got a letter the other day in which, during my treatment, there was a policy that I wanted changed, and I fought with them for years. They're sending out what they call a learning letter, which will say basically, if you do it like this, this might happen. But in the letter, the medical director had said, "Thank you for your consistent persistence." And I said, "Well, I've been called many things, and I used to always say I like to think about it as tenacity, not head picking. But I think consistent persistence, I like that as well." Whenever I was very, very unwell, there's a cancer support charity here called Macmillan Cancer Support, and they provide nurses and information, and there's always, phone lines and things. They were very, very good to me in some of my darkest times when I didn't want to speak to my husband because I didn't want to upset him. And there was one nurse in particular, it was a man called Terry, and I just loved Nurse Terry. He was fabulous, I remember one time waking up in hospital and he was giving me a foot massage, which anyone else you would have been get off me. But because it was Terry, it was so relaxing and it was wonderful. Our son's history teacher approached me. He approached me and he said that he played in a rock covers band. He said, "If you ever want to do a charity gig to raise money for a charity, if you can get a venue, we will play for you for free." So I went and spoke to a guy that I knew who runs a wee club, and I said, "Look, can I do this charity gig?" And he said, "Yes." But he said, "Why don't you invite some of the other local bands? Because I know all the rock bands because we were going to see them for years, and some of the other bands and the bands that were playing were giving us t-shirts and things." So then somebody said, "Why don't you have a raffle?" We went round local businesses and things, and it was a massive success. We ended up with 5 bands the first year. My sister was getting married. She said, "I don't want any, there's nothing we need, donate to Trish's fundraiser." And we ended up, it was over 6 years. We lost 1 year for COVID, but 6 years, 5 gigs and nearly £30,000. We're delighted, and part of what we did with the money was refurbish a relatives room in our local hospital. I called it the Riverbank Relatives Room, and it's themed on my favourite book, The Wind in the Willows. It's just beautiful. It's supposed to be a haven where, if a hospital ward is never quiet. There's no privacy, there's no peace. So this is somewhere where patients and their families can go and just get away from the hubbub of a ward. A guy who was in one of the bands that played every year and never got paid, his mother-in-law was in the end stage of her life, and she passed away, and they spent a lot of time in the room. He said, we met him, and he said, "Oh, we've been spending a lot of time in your room." And I said, "Sorry, whose room is it?" And he said, "Your room, the Riverbank room." And I said, "How many times did you play that gig?" And he said, "Oh, we did them all, 5. And I said, "What did you get paid?" And he said, "Nothing." And I said, "It's not my room, it's your room, it's our room." So that has been wonderful. Yeah, and you know what? I think through all the horror of a cancer diagnosis, especially brain cancer, and through all the treatment, that has been wonderful. I got a medal. I know. Every time I think about it, it's so surreal. It's a British Empire medal that I was awarded. It's not one of the big fancy ones. I'm not a dame or anything like that. It's not one of the big fancy ones. It's actually nicknamed the Working Class Gong. Every year, police officers get medals, but support staff, the civilian roles, don't often get them. So I thought, you know what, this is one for the little people. This is one for the ones behind the scenes that don't often get the credit. So I love that about it. And just because it's a medal, and we got to go to Palace, which was incredible. Exactly what you would imagine. It's crazy. It's just such a special thing. We couldn't believe we were there. And you walk in, and you've all the tourists are standing, looking through the fences, and you have this wee ticket, and they call up everyone who's here for the garden party, and you walk up with your wee ticket, and the gates are opened, and then you go, And everybody's looking in through the railings going, who are they? I didn't get to meet any of the royals. I saw them from a distance, but that's fine. Just to be there was a special thing. Who was Prince Charles, who's now the king? He was there with Camilla, who's now the queen. And they did a bit of a walkabout, but people were, it was pointy elbows out, as we would say, trying to get in to speak to them. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. So I saw them, but they passed fairly close by, but I wasn't going to start pushing myself forward to say hello. I thought it's enough that I'm here and I can see them. And it was the Chief Constable and Deputy Chief Constable, I believe, that put me forward for it. I don't really know because they've never told me, but when the Chief Constable brought me in to tell me that I was getting it, he brought me in and he told me this, and Finlay came in then as well. He wanted Finlay in with me as well. I think he thought I would just have a meltdown because it was too much, but no, I said to him, I was quite rude. I said to him, is this just like a sympathy medal then? Is this a survival medal? And Finlay said, don't be so rude. And the Chief Constable, who I worked directly for him quite often, and he said, no, it's not. But I said, when you start this, and he lifted this folder, and he's like, did you do this? And 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 I went, well, yes. And I said, but that was my job. That's my job. And he said, well, you'd be amazed how many people don't do their job, never mind do it well. He said, now, do you want the medal or not? He's retired now, but, we laughed about it for a long time. He said, we knew that you would be, we're not worthy. But you don't ever, who ever thinks they're worthy of getting a medal? No, I am proud of it, but I don't feel like I just feel like I did my job. I suppose I do go, quite often even now, we go above and beyond, but it's because I enjoy it.
Hope you enjoyed Trish's story, a reminder that strength can show up as laughter and helping others through pain. Click on the next video to more ordinary people, extraordinary stories. If you enjoy hearing real people share unforgettable stories, please subscribe.